As a constitutional law attorney, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Well, good morning. It is February 8th. And at 10 a.m. this morning, the Supreme Court of the United States will hear oral arguments in Trump versus Anderson. This is an historic case about whether former President Donald Trump is permitted on the primary ballot in Colorado. So this case is narrowly about the interpretation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, the so-called insurrection clause. But today will also mark the first time the 9 justices will appear in public discussing January 6th, Donald Trump, and also the 2024 presidential election. And so the question that is presented to the U.S. Supreme Court is this: did the Colorado Supreme Court err in ordering President Trump excluded from the 2024 presidential primary ballot? So joining me now to discuss is Jordan Sekulow, who is the executive director of the American Center for Law and Justice, and the ACLJ represents the Colorado Republican Party. So Jordan, thanks so much for joining me, and let's break this down in terms of what the Supreme Court is actually deciding.
I mean, I think today what we're going to decide is and see from the court. One is where they go with these kind of a multiple argument paths you can take and get to the same conclusion that Colorado was wrong by their court determining, and the state court determining, ultimately the state Supreme Court determining that they could allow the Secretary of State to unilaterally make a decision that President Trump was barred by the 14th Amendment, Section 2, for the insurrection, so January 6th. And some of the lead up to questioning the ballot security, things like that, the voting, even though there'd been no conviction of that in a court of law. So they were jumping one step of the 14th Amendment. And remember, there was an impeachment over these acts, and he was acquitted. So in the only time this was kind of tried, in a sense, that you could make an argument, he was acquitted of that. And then in other courts, even in cases that are pending right now, he hasn't been charged with what's mentioned in the 14th Amendment. So right there, again, that's kind of like the bold, big picture. It's whether or not this is self-executing. What does that mean? It basically means, do you have to have some other act before this bars you? That's what we believe. And I think in the Trump stance, they're going to argue today, but we're party to this, not just amicus, but the party, is that, if Congress takes a step, impeachment, enacting some kind of law provision, some kind of step that holds you accountable for this act, that could be enough. If a court had held that the president Trump had actually committed this crime, of course that would hold. But if you actually read the 14th Amendment, it says it's a bar from holding the office, not necessarily from running for the office. And there's this post cleanup that can be done, which I think also speaks to kind of where it kicks in, which is that the Congress can always remove this burden. So not a court, but Congress by a 2/3. So unlikely, of course, in our current political climate, that would be done for any kind of party's presidential nominee or their winning presidential nominee. But you see right there, I mean, that's 3 different ways the court could go. You could also go and just say the president is not an officer. This doesn't apply. And that's because typically throughout the Constitution, you'll see officers mentioned, and the president is mentioned separately, including in the impeachment clause, appointment clause. Chief Justice Roberts has signed on to an opinion before where he said, the president appoints officers. That's the difference between the president, who is in himself a branch of government, which is unique because the executive branch is really all about, though it's gotten very large in the United States, the president of the United States. So these are. We also have a First Amendment issue representing the state party and the right to peacefully assemble and, again, decide on their own who their nominees are going to be and not have that infringed on or told who you can vote for or not vote for by a court. That when this, again, hasn't been adjudicated on whether or not this bar kicks in.
I'm speaking with Jordan Sekulow, who is the executive director for the American Center for Law and Justice. And speaking of the 14th Amendment, I mean, there are several problems here, Jordan, and a few of which you mentioned, which is that this section does not appear to be self-executing. There has to be a step because the language is no person. And then they go on and list several individuals, which, by the way, one of them is not the president of the United States. That's an issue. But then also no person that is listed shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States. And so what does that term shall have engaged mean? Has there been a finding? What do you make of the fact that this is not, it doesn't say anywhere in the language a conviction. It doesn't mention the courts. This is all about Congress. But what do you make of the fact that there was a finding, at least on the trial court level in Colorado, that Trump did engage in insurrection, even though that was a civil case? Does that necessarily matter in terms of, well, yeah, there's been an adjudication because it was at least on the trial court level?
Yeah, I think that, again, it's more of a criminal statute, and like you said, Jen, I think it lives more in the federal world and in the congressional world. I mean, obviously, if this is a case where the Supreme Court could go broad, it could also go narrow. I mean, it's kind of, this current court, I mean, there's ways you could see them going, now, I know there were liberal state courts that totally tossed this out. So this is not, we're not going to take this. We're not even, and we were, I think we were active in 12 states until this was ultimately taken up by the Supreme Court. And we know that the ramifications of this are huge because there are probably 10 more states, blue states, that are in the process in case the Supreme Court does allow this, barring President Trump from both primary and general election ballots out. There's been some interesting things the court could do, like we just discussed. Could they say, well, it's not about the primary, and then we move on and almost open this up to, well, what about the general election? And then, I mean, so I'm not sure. I think this timing of this is too close, but I think that the civil side of this, that doesn't provide the kind of due process necessary to bar someone this way. But again, we don't have a ton of history here because you have obviously the Civil War in the 14th Amendment to point to, and the idea of whether or not this even applies. I mean, so even if that theory was right, that a civil court case applies, does this affect the President of the United States when it applies to the President of the United States at this time? Because, again, not an officer, takes a different oath. I mean, we go through all these different points. The fact that the President has their own oath to the Constitution, separate from everyone else in the federal government. And that was, again, that's all found in the original Constitution before this amendment. And I think it kind of is the opposite. We were talking about this yesterday. It's almost the opposite of the idea of the entire 14th Amendment, which was to make sure states didn't step in during the Civil War as we were moving towards a long battle for civil rights in America. But this idea that they were limited in the ability to say, no, we're not going to recognize this in our state, and we're not going to have, equal protection or due process. And so, again, I think what we'll learn from the oral arguments today is, are the justices going for something broad or narrow? And we know that Chief Justice Roberts, the more justice he could get on board, especially in cases that could be very controversial, maybe they can come up with an opinion that isn't, which is just doesn't apply here. People can vote for who they vote for. This goes back to, again, people get to nominate, and we don't believe that. Or do they go kind of very specific in this once and for all and say this does not apply to the president and future presidents or presidential candidates, and that's it. I mean, so they have a lot of options on our side to take on a narrow step and a broad step. So that makes it unique, too. This is kind of like not like overturning Roe versus Wade. It is a huge case with huge ramifications. And for our client, and I know this can be tough for people, but if you've got to take President Trump out of it for a moment and think about the fact that if this is in place, a hostile state government, like for instance in Maine, to have an adjudication on this, whether or not you qualify for their ballot, which is, the basic qualifications that states are allowed to make, which is the courts have upheld, and they've also struck down the ones that they thought went too far in violation of the Constitution. And there, I mean, just think about that fact that again, it didn't even get through an actual trial, and they were going to say, no, on that they could remove it from the ballot. So again, I think the court's got to act fast. This, I think, has to be resolved almost before Super Tuesday. Because you think about the fact that people have already voted, and in a few states, and they're about to vote, and it doesn't. So I expect it hasn't been the most fast track case in the history of the court, but it's on a fast track, and I think we expect to get a decision within the next sometime before Super Tuesday, that first week in March.
We should. And I'm speaking with Jordan Sekulow, who is the executive director of the American Center for Law and Justice. And we are in February. And typically, if there's oral argument, we wouldn't expect a decision until June or late June. But obviously, that would be a little later than we would prefer, and that I think the Supreme Court would prefer. And you're absolutely right. And in fact, I just told listeners yesterday regarding the presidential immunity case that you have to take Trump out of this. This is not about whether you prefer Trump or not as your candidate or politically. This is all about the precedential value of these cases. So in just the last about 4 minutes I have with you, Jordan Sekulow, let's talk about the Supreme Court composition. You mentioned, kind of our side, and I think people understand generally that the Supreme Court is more conservative. I would say we're kind of in a 3-3-3 composition, not completely conservative, and that we can count on the Supreme Court majority necessarily ruling not in our favor per se, but in an originalist fashion. And so a lot of people are suggesting that this may be a 9-0 opinion or an 8-1. I'm not really sure I see at least the three most liberal justices, because of the political nature involved, allowing that, and maybe on a more narrow ground trying to dissent. So what is your perspective as far as where we might get? Will we at least hopefully get a 5-4 in favor of genuine democracy, which is interestingly what the liberals and the Democrats always say they're for, right?
Yeah, I do think ultimately, and most time with these cases, especially with presidential issues, most of those commentators would be nervous to even make any predictions, right? I mean, it's because it's such a heavy weight of issue, but because this one is not I would say very different from like the immunity case and all those kind of issues. That this again goes to more of an election issue and people getting the right to vote and choose. I think. Again, there's a narrow path for the court, and there's the broader path. If the Chief Justice, I think, and others believe that they could handle this, and even one's problem narrowly by just saying we don't believe this section just doesn't apply, or for this it's not self-executing. So one of those two options. Not that you can never invoke this, but that you've got to invoke it in a specific way. Or that you say that this doesn't apply because he's not the officer one. They have gone back and forth on, so I think that might get it down to a slimmer, still possibly a win. But I think if they look at whether or not, again, you've just got to have more due process here, or some kind of action by Congress, or a criminal court before this kicks in, and again, they're going to look at the history and when this provision was put in the Constitution, how it's been used, and I think ultimately, again, it doesn't really matter who you support for president. I know that's tough for liberals on the court. It's tough for Republicans too, because there's Republicans on both sides of this issue of whether this applies here or not. But if you really did believe it applied, why wait 3 years, 4 years when you knew this was a likely scenario? And kind of try to do this last minute, which is almost voter suppression in itself, because if this case isn't out by Super Tuesday, people are going to wonder, what is my vote going to matter? Because what happens here, it's not like they just take your name off the ballot. People can write you in and that will count. It doesn't matter who you vote for. If you vote for that person who's barred, so in this case it would be President Trump, your vote will not count. I don't think the Supreme Court is going to look real.
And we got to leave it there. Jordan Sekulow, Executive Director of American Center for Law and Justice. You can go to aclj.org. Oral argument, 10 a.m. this morning. We'll be right back with more. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce, 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com and use promo code Jenna, that's Jenna, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. Welcome back, and we are still talking about the GOP, but this time the national GOP, and specifically the RNC. So Ronna McDaniel, who has been the chairwoman for the past 3 terms, reports are that she will be stepping down, and this comes after reporting by investigative journalist Jennifer Van Laar from Redstate. This exclusive reporting that actually started back in 2022 before Ronna was up for a re-election as chair. And this exclusive coming January 31st, so just about 8 or 9 days ago, exclusive RNC spent $1.5 million on floral arrangements, limos, management, media consultants, and more. And so in the wake of this reporting, there was a lot of pressure for Ronna McDaniel to step down because the RNC, of course, has faced financial issues. They've just approved I believe it's about $10 million line of credit, so are having a lot of financial problems. So joining me to discuss all this and more is Jennifer Van Laar, who has done all of this great reporting. And Jennifer, this has really gone viral for people, I think, suggesting that that other people, like, for example, Vivek Ramaswamy, who really hit Ronna hard from the debate stage, that some of those reasons, or that Trump has asked her to resign. But really, I think the timing here shows that your reporting was really the significant move towards this. So what did you actually uncover from the RNC?
Thank you. So, yes, this started, like you mentioned, back in December of 2022. And after we had come off that terrible loss in the 2022 midterm election and started looking at what she was spending the money on, and it wasn't the things that win elections. So that kind of started the ball rolling there. Ronna was able to kind of keep the members of the 168 in line and get reelection. But I think that report, and that kind of went viral at that time, turned a lot of donors off of the RNC and started those problems where they weren't getting the donations in 2023 that they needed. So then when this report, which I started in November of 2023, came out, just as the RNC winter meeting was starting in Las Vegas, it showed everyone that she didn't learn anything from these losses in any way. She kept spending in ways that were wasteful, in addition to not giving the base or the grassroots the tools that they needed to win elections. Like, we know that she starved Virginia of money that they needed that could have kept their state house conservative in the 2023 election. So, yeah, I think that all led to all of this. But what we found that was the most troubling in this update was that the Democrats are far outspending the Republicans when it goes to transferring money to state parties, get out the vote texting, voter file maintenance, and the data kind of things, and the data that's the backbone of everything that goes to get out the vote.
Yeah, and this really goes to, I think, the deeper issue of the RNC is that they're just not winning. And we can see that not just from, federal elections, but even state elections. And, there's analysis that a lot of people have posted to say, okay, here's where we were. And over the past, maybe 6 or 8 election cycles, obviously including midterms, off-cycle elections, we're just losing ground as conservatives. And so Ronna, in my view, and I've long been a critic of her. And for those who follow me on social media, I've trended a few times that hashtag Ronna must go for a number of reasons, but primarily because you're right, I think, Jennifer, that she simply hasn't learned from past mistakes. She isn't managing the party well, and she also has not given states the support that they need. And so back when she was running for RNC chair for a third time, which was against her promise, it was fascinating to me to see that polls were suggesting that like 98% of grassroots Republicans, the actual voters, did not want to see her leading the party. And yet she was overwhelmingly reelected because it was just the state party officers that vote for the chairperson. So where are the state party chairs, to your knowledge, in terms of what happens next?
So what I was told from sources I had in the meetings at Las Vegas was that 60 plus of them, and this is as of Wednesday morning, which is the first day of the meeting, and when my report had come out, that about 60 plus of them were definitely believing what was in my report and wanting change. The problem is that a lot of these people, it's wild. They're so disconnected from the base. They're in each of these state party delegations that goes to the RNC. 2 of the members are elected directly from the state party executive boards themselves. So they could be people that have a lot of money that don't really interact with the average person that has been in these positions for decades. And it shows because they don't have any clue what the base wants, and yet they're in this position. So whether these people will want to vote Ronna out is going to depend on President Trump basically telling them that that's what he wants, because he's the presumptive nominee and he'll be leading the party. So they will defer to him. But privately, at least a third of these RNC members are saying, yeah, we have an issue. We have a problem here with the spending. And they should have a problem with the losing, frankly.
Absolutely. And I'm speaking with Jennifer Van Laar, who is an investigative journalist at Redstate, and you can read her excellent piece at redstate.com, which is titled Exclusive RNC Spent $1.5 million on Floral Arrangements, Limos, Management / Media Consultants. And we have seen the spending of the RNC, and we've seen, that as you said, they're just not winning. And of course, these types of positions that are high up in the RNC are not elected officials in government. And so what listeners need to understand is that this is all about the money. This is all about financing campaigns and giving the money that you donate via WinRed and donate to the RNC. They are the number one basically PAC or super PAC that funds statewide races, federal races, and is the arm of the Republican Party that controls most of the funds, and that's why this is so important. And so you look at Ronna as well as the head of the RNC, Jen, and it really surprised me to see some of the support that she gave to candidates that really didn't represent the traditional values of the Republican Party or conservative values. Like, for example, the candidate for U.S. Senate from my former home state of Colorado, who was very pro-choice, and that didn't really matter. And she has been in the lane of, well, let's get a big tent party. The math is what matters. And yet she's supporting and funding candidates that ultimately lose, like the candidate out of Colorado. So in looking for a replacement when she does step down, there are a number of names that are being thrown around. The one that most listeners will know is Kevin McCarthy. Interestingly, that he has been floated as maybe a dark horse. But when I spoke with you yesterday, kind of in prepping for this segment, you had mentioned a couple of other names that are potentials that people probably haven't heard of.
Yeah, and that there's a lot of horse trading that's going on behind the scenes right now, because even when Ronna resigns, and she is going to, despite her subtle protestations yesterday, that the 168 has to vote on it. So there's horse trading going on, like, okay, well, if we get this person chair, who would be co-chair? But I think that McCarthy's name floating is a serious thing, and it's for one reason, because he has a lot of money. still within his PAC. And that cannot happen because we know that he lost the speakership basically because of his transactional nature over years and promising things that he couldn't really deliver to someone because he might have promised something to someone else. That is exactly how he would run the RNC, and it wouldn't be about winning.
Yeah, and interestingly, he's being floated, I think, as well because he does have a good ability to fundraise, and the RNC is really needing that at this point. But you mentioned this is all about transactional politics, and if there is one lesson I learned really quickly in my very brief time in the swamp in D.C. is that there's always more going on behind the scenes than just this is the best person for the job, this is the best policy. It's always a transactional nature and what people are getting and negotiating behind the scenes. So what about the other person that you mentioned from, I think it's the California GOP chair, Jessica Patterson?
So she's definitely being floated as co-chair. What people need to know about her is that her whole career has come about because of Kevin McCarthy. She's worked with him closely for the past 20 years. And so basically having Jessica in there would be having McCarthy running the RNC.
Well, and that's where we've seen, Ronna has basically done Trump's bidding over her tenure and is, in my opinion, why she was reelected the third time was because, of course, Trump and then also one of his main aides, Susie Wiles, really whipped the votes to get Ronna in spite of what the grassroots wanted and even what the MAGA movement overall is very anti-Ronna. So that contrast and a little bit of cognitive dissonance is interesting. But let's also talk about Harmeet Dillon because she was really the main player in that contest that was running as the opponent of Ronna McDaniel. And we just talked about in the earlier segment, for those who are just joining now, about the Supreme Court case that is being argued today at 10 a.m. That is about whether or not Colorado can kick Trump off the ballot. And Harmeet and her Dillon Law Group are actually the counsel of record in that case. And so she has been ardently advocating for First Amendment issues. She understands and has been part of the RNC for a really long time. People have been concerned that maybe she is too much in line with Trump in some ways. I don't personally see that. I think that she is supporting him in some really good ways, like this case in front of the Supreme Court, where I absolutely think that she should and Trump should win that case. But I think that she understands the politicking and is willing to stand up and say this is the right decision. What's your opinion, Jen, on Harmeet, and does she still have the same level of support that she did back when she was running against Ronna?
I agree with everything that you just said there, and I think she does at least have the same amount of support. I know she's told me both privately and she's said online that she is not seeking to be the chair at this point, that she likes doing the legal stuff. I don't know if they approached her and said everyone wants you to be, if she would refuse it. But I think that she makes a good point. We really need a robust legal program at the RNC, and maybe the best place for Harmeet is to have her strategizing, give a 40,000-foot view of here's where different lawsuits need to be filed across the country and prioritize them and fund them, so that we can start really making change at some of these state houses where we need changes in election law or battling back against ballot access and making sure that we win those things and have good attorneys, because the general counsel at the RNC now has never argued a case in his life. That's Michael Whatley, who they want to make the chair. He has a law degree, but he had to reactivate it to become the general counsel and has only clerked and never been in a courtroom. So I think having him over all of the election integrity stuff is just terrible.
Yeah, and I could not agree with you more in terms of the RNC not being very helpful on the election integrity issues, and also Justin Reamer, who's one of the counsel for the RNC, is, in my opinion, one of those that is also not doing a great job, even though he's a little bit more of a lawyer than apparently some of these other people. But when you look at the group, like I had Cleta Mitchell on, I believe it was last week on air here, and she's with the Conservative Partnership Institute, and is the fellow there for election integrity issues, and she runs a group that I'm a part of, and we have a phone call every Friday, and it's interesting to see how much just spread of ideas and implementations of things that everybody has. And yet the main issue, of course, is always funding. Who is funding these types of suits? Where's the master plan kind of thing? And I agree with you that if somebody like Harmeet were able to take some of the resources that the RNC could provide and then actually go and fund different people to do different things, maybe we would have a little bit more cohesive defenses and actually advances on some of these election integrity issues, like what the left has with their whole democracy docket, as they kind of falsely call it. And they're making headway because they have funds. They don't care about just getting, media hits. They care about actually getting the work done. And so all of these issues, Jen Van Laar, I think that this goes to the heart of why people are so frustrated with the RNC, because it seems like they are much more interested in spending $1.5 million on floral arrangements, limos, and management media consultants than they actually are about doing the business of winning.
Right, because a lot of the business of winning, like in journalism or in law, is it's not done in front of cameras, and it's not fun, and it's a lot of work. And to do that, it takes someone who really believes in what they're doing, and it doesn't seem like the people in charge of the party now are that serious about believing in the cause.
Well, and from what you've said in just the last 2 minutes I have with you here, Jen, and I so appreciate your reporting and thank you from the bottom of my heart for your work here that is finally getting Ronna out of the RNC. Just as my opinion, I think she needed to go a long time ago. So I am delighted to see this happen. I hope that she'll be replaced with someone who actually makes these changes that we've been talking about. But for listeners who are very concerned about this and want to have their voices heard, does it matter at all to contact their state officers and suggest that they get someone in there to do these kinds of things, or even suggest a candidate's name? I mean, is that even a possibility?
It makes a difference. Yeah, it just be very professional and give good reasons why, not just I'm mad at Ronna and I hate her. Yeah, right.
Right.
Give some good reasons why and some potential qualifications of what you want to see in a replacement.
Great. Well, we will continue to follow that. And do we have a time frame on when a re-election would be held?
Very shortly after South Carolina, because we are in the middle of this election year, and I'm sure they want to get the person up to speed.
All right. Well, excellent. Well, Jen Van Laar, who is a writer for Redstate, you can read all of her work at redstate.com. Really appreciate you getting up so early. I know you're in California, so it's very, very early for you there on the West Coast. But thanks so much for your work. As you know, my friend Mike Lindell has a passion to help everyone get the best sleep of their life. He didn't stop by simply creating the best pillow. Mike created the Giza Dream bed sheets. They look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep for me, which is crucial for my busy schedule. Mike found the world's best cotton. It is ultra soft and breathable, but extremely durable. Mike's Giza sheets come with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. The Giza Dream Sheets come in a variety of sizes and colors. Mike's latest incredible deal is the sale of the year. For a limited time, you will receive 50% off the Giza Dream Sheets. You will also receive a set for as low as $29.98. So go to mypillow.com, click on the radio podcast square, and use the promo code Jenna. There you will find not only this amazing offer, but also deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow 2.0 mattress topper, which I have and I love, the MyPillow kitchen towel sets, and now even flannel sheets and so much more. We definitely need flannel sheets for as crazy as all of this weather has been lately. So go to mypillow.com and make sure you use the promo code Jenna or call 1-800-564-8475. That's 1-800-564-8475 and use the promo code Jenna.